We believe 100% of this kind of software is going to be built by non-developers. Amazon is a customer, and they have this app where they press buttons and satellites actually move. The US Army is a Retool customer too, and they use Retool to save the turtles. That's the cool thing about a dev tool, right? Is that developer tools span all industries. So,
Hi everyone, I'm joined today by David, the founder of Retool. David shares how they found their early customers, how they've changed their business with AI, and what advice he has for founders starting a dev tool right now. You have my all-time favorite H1 of any product. I remember but it was I still have the screenshot of it somewhere. I should have pulled this up in advance, but it's like, stop doing this, stop struggling with this and banging your head against the wall. Start building internal tools that move your business forward or something like that. And it was just like, I remember reading the description. It was just such a great articulation of the pain that I was struggling with as a pretty junior developer, and then trying to build these tools. And it was just spending so much time on really things that felt like they've been done a million times before. And I kind of had that as my kind of every time I want to write a hero copy, I always go to that, and I've got it saved somewhere.
that's hilarious. I probably wrote it. I think this was pretty early, I think, when you probably first saw that. And I think what you're describing is honestly what our experience was too. So my co-founder and I, we're both engineers, and we both built a lot of internal tools in previous jobs, lives. And just like what you said, it's kind of remarkable how rote it is. It's just doing the same thing over and over again. It's, oh, I got to make a new Redux store. Okay, great. I got to make a new table here. Oh, here are the columns. Okay, I got to figure out how to submit the form now. Oh, wait, but the submit button, I wanted to show a loading indicator. Oh, how do I do that? It's like it's the same thing over. It should be way easier. And I don't know if you ever used Rails. I'm a big Rails fanboy, and Rails is so easy. It just handles so many things for you. And so that's kind of the idea behind Retool is, could we allow you to only write the code that is specific to your business, which, as it turns out, is 10% of the code that you actually write is specific to your business. 90% is all boilerplate. So,
Yeah, it was amazing. And maybe I can almost give the pitch of Retool for you in the I was working with this. It was a really cool use case. It was I was working with this charity that does surf therapy. They're called the Wave
okay.
Project.
Wow.
Hopefully they're not going to be mad for me to say this. But they were using Retool to see all of the bookings and stuff of people, and it's so great because you could just create a query to a database. So you got everything, and then you can actually, people that aren't the devs can actually just go and see that and change statuses, basically update the database. So you don't have to it was so fast to just get that up and running. It was it's a massive time saver for us.
That's amazing. That's great. And yeah, it's really cool. I think one part of being a dev tool company or founder is that you get to see so many use cases. I never would have thought that would have been a use case, but one of the use cases, Amazon is a customer, and they have this app where they press buttons and satellites actually move, which is
Really?
pretty cool on Kuiper. So that's pretty interesting. The US Army is a Retool customer too, and they use Retool to save the turtles. Where seriously, so they do dredging at different ports across the country, and as they do dredging, sometimes they run into turtle populations, and so they actually have to track where the turtle populations are, how big are they, and it used to be all pen and paper. They would say, "Oh, turtle report," and they would write a report. And I talked to the engineer who built this, and he was saying that back when it's pen and paper, you have a giant stack of paper at the end of the quarter, and no one really wants to enter those reports to a database, and so you just don't know where the turtles are. And now they built a mobile app where they take a photo of the turtles and they say, "Here are the turtles, and here's how many." I think they use LLMs actually to say, "Here's how many turtles there are. And here's the lat long where the turtles are." And so they say, "Oh, don't dredge here because there's turtle population here." So it's use cases like that are just so cool. You never really imagine, but that's the cool thing about a dev tool, right? Is that developer tools span all industries. So
Yeah, so people just can use it in ways you could never imagine. Yeah, that's wild. And So now, like so I was saying to you before that like I'm extremely familiar with like Retool before AI, and how has Retool changed with LLMs and stuff now?
Yeah. So as you know, because you've used Retool, Retool for a long time was always entirely geared towards developers. And over the past maybe 18, 24 months, I think we've developed the conviction internally, but also, in large part due to the evidence that technologies that we've tried, that actually production software, especially internal software, so apps that write back to a database, to an API, that give you some reports that allow you to run your business, we believe 100% of this kind of software is going to be built by non-developers in the next 24, 36 months. I think developers will still be required, especially for more complex projects. But honestly, a lot of the time, those more complex projects are the consumer-facing applications. You can imagine, so Airbnb is a customer of ours as well. Airbnb's mobile app is an amazing mobile application. Their website is amazing. And if you think about if you were the CTO at Airbnb, where would you want your engineers spending time? It's going to be stuff like that. That's the kind of stuff that, it's honestly even a little bit harder to vibe code, or it's, the quality bar is so high, right? You care so much about every single pixel. Whereas what Airbnb uses us for is they use us for processing insurance claims, and the alternative is using a spreadsheet. And for a simple, app to process insurance claims, does a developer really need to get involved with that? We think the answer is not. And so that's the major change. There's two major changes. That's one of them, is that now Retool is geared towards, I would say, what we call tomorrow's developers. And these people are not totally non-technical, but they're, I would say, Excel users. They're people on data teams, people on RevOps teams, people like that, that are able to write SQL, that could write a few lines of code if they really wanted to, but are not professional developers. And the idea here is that instead of having to go learn Redux, instead of having to go learn React, and all this crap that you have to learn to become a developer, you can just write a bit of SQL, maybe even vibe code a bit, and now get production applications. So that's, I think, one pretty major change for us over the last 18 months, let's say.
Scaling DevTools is sponsored by WorkOS. If things start going well, some of your customers are going to start asking for enterprise features. Things like SSO, skim provisioning, role-based access control. These things are hard to build, and you could get stuck spending all your time doing that instead of actually making a great dev tool. That's why WorkOS exists. They help you with all of those enterprise features, and they're trusted by OpenAI, Vercel, and Perplexity. Here's what Kyle from Depot has to say about WorkOS.
We use WorkOS to effectively add all of the SSO and skim to Depot. So for us, we can effectively offer SSO and skim, and it's like 2 clicks of a button, and we don't ever have to think about it. It's like one of the best features that we can add to Depot, and it's super affordable, which effectively allows us to like break the SSO tax joke and essentially say like you can have SSO and skim as like an add-on onto your monthly plan. So it really allows smaller startups to essentially offer like that enterprise feature without a huge engineering investment behind it. Like it's literally, we can just use a tool behind the scenes and our life is exponentially easier.
Thanks again, WorkOS. Back to the episode.
I think that Retool, as you know, historically has been pretty focused on front-end applications. And I think front ends are, I have to say, it's a very sizable portion of our revenue. But actually, our fastest growing slice of revenue was actually more agents or automations. And specifically, this is going to get into my whole take on AI right now, but I'll just give it quickly, which is my take on AI is that I think LLMs are incredibly, incredibly smart at this point. At any given task, they are probably better than you or I at any specific task. And yet, despite LLMs being so smart, they can solve, IMO level math problems. They can do all sorts of crazy things. And yet, they're not super useful right now in work. In coding, they're very useful. But outside of coding, LLM use cases are actually not super easy to find. Maybe summarization is one, but it's kind of shocking that despite how smart they are, how little impact they have on most CIO VPE lives today. And I think the main missing thing is LLMs are plenty smart already. The problem is they don't have arms and legs. They can't go do things in your business. And so we've been really focused on how do we allow tomorrow's developers to go harness these LLMs and really give these LLMs arms and legs to do things in your business. Because if you think about something like a Claude Code, for example, theoretically, everything you do in Claude Code, you could actually do in ChatGPT. You could say, hey, I would write me this code. I copy the code, I paste it to my IDE. I get an error message. I copy back into ChatGPT. Obviously, it's very ineffective, because you are the API for the LLM. The LLM is using you as its API, basically, and you're pretty slow, right? Uh, and what Claude Code does is they say, oh, forget it. Why don't you just let the LLM do it itself? And it's very effective. Now, if you could bring that, but not just to coding, but to all jobs, let this LLM send the email, let it make a phone call, let it actually do things in Salesforce, let it actually do things in my database. That is when I think LLMs get really, really powerful. So that's maybe the second way Retool has changed, is that instead of just building front ends, we're now very focused on agents and allowing LLMs to actually do things in your business, which I think is honestly going to rival front ends as a market in the next few years. Front ends themselves may even go away, I think, in the next few years.
Interesting. How do you mean go away?
Oh, well, so for example, I think there are rumors you may have seen, like OpenAI is working on a new device, for example, that they're trying to challenge Apple. And I think all the rumors say that the new device has no screen. And if you think about it, uh, honestly, how often do you need a screen? In some cases, the screen is pretty good for sure, but in many cases, you don't need one. You can imagine, for example, you could imagine AirPods as a computing interface, where AirPods are always with you. They listen to everything you listen to, and you can just tell the AirPods to do things. So you might say, "Hey, I just got off this podcast with Jack, but there are some few next steps. Can you go do those next steps?" You just tell your AirPod that, and your AirPod could, theoretically go call an LLM, or call an API, and could just go do things. The LLM will connect it to your email account, or connect it to your to-do list, or connect it to your databases. Maybe it just does all the next steps, and there's no front end at all there. So
Yeah, that makes sense. The shameless plug, where we just made a little voice interface for Claude Code, like running on your computer, but then talk to it from your phone. And it's it is kind of a lot of stuff you can just, if you trust that it can do it, it's I guess you don't need to get involved with the screen. You could just tell it once, just take care of this for me.
yeah, totally. I think the screen is helpful for checking work, because maybe you can scan information a lot faster than you can listen to information. At least that's true for me. But like you said, I think if the correctness goes up, the percent of things you need to check goes down. Like, let's say a restaurant reservation, for example. I could just, if I get an idea for a restaurant I want to go to tonight, I just tell my AirPod, hey, can you make me a reservation for this place? And the LM can go and just do it. And if it tells me, hey, I made a reservation for this place, I probably would trust it, I think. Again, depending on correctness, but I think that's the future. So those are the two ways that Retool's really changed and scaled, or Retool, the regional dev tool, is one is we've broadened our ICP to tomorrow's developers, and secondly, we've broadened our what Retool helps you build from just front-end applications into our fastest growing segment now is actually agents and automations.
Yeah, on the ICP part, I felt like, as I was saying about the kind of the heading, I remember reading it and thinking okay, these guys get it. They understand this. It was they understand my pain here. I'm spending all this time doing stuff that feels like it's been done loads of times and it's still annoying. How do you understand your ICP well and build what they need?
Yeah, great question. So, to be honest with you, I don't have a great strategy here, except for the fact that uh, we are developers, and I haven't tried starting a startup where I'm not the ICP. I think it would go a lot worse, because, to your point, a lot of what I do, a lot of the features we work on, a lot of the copy that we write, all those things, all that really is only possible because we know we know the developer so well. We know how hard it is to learn Redux for the first time, for example. It's functional programming. You do a fold. It's do you really need to know that? Probably not. We so I don't know if I have great advice. I would say if you're not a developer, you probably shouldn't start a DevTools company. Is probably my only advice there. I think maybe as the company scales, you obviously have to figure out how to get product marketing, talking to your developers. Your developers are not always the PM, for example. So there's a lot to discuss there, maybe, as the company scales. But to be honest, I think you just have to, to start a DevTools company, you have to be a developer. You just have to start it yourself and you have to outsource as little as possible. Because I think, as you know, as a developer, I'm this way too. I can tell very quickly if the tool's not for me.
Mm.
And if it's not for me, I bounce. I'm not interested anymore. And so today, one of our challenges actually is how do we appeal to not the totally non-technical person, but the semi-technical person and the developer. And that I think is it's an interesting topic. So
Yeah, because I was going to say, so it makes sense. Like, and when you were starting, and that's another question I'm going to come back to, but I know you started off like, I listened to you on Indie Hackers like back in the day, and so I did, right. Like, I'm not imagining that, just to double check.
you did, yes, I was on
Yeah,
Indie Hacker some time
yeah.
ago. Yeah, they're great.
Yeah. So I'll come to that, but as you do expand and broaden it, like, you're probably not the ICP of like Excel user, like heavy, how are you like kind of trying to keep that like real understanding as it goes beyond sort of like your experience, I guess?
So my overall thesis on where programming or development is going is that we continuously move higher and higher up in the stack.
Mm,
And I think that is an inevitable, and it has always happened, and it will continue to happen. And what I mean by that is if you look back to, let's say, the 1950s or the 40s, for example, when you program computers, well, I punched cards. That's pretty challenging. uh, it's very low level. If you're a CS major, you probably took assembly courses when you were in university, and I did as well. And it's very low level. Trying to write an assembly you can do it, but it requires so much effort, and you have to hold so much in your head. It's so easy to make a mistake, and you go from assembly into something like C, which is higher level, but you still do manual memory management. And I'm old enough, and you're probably old enough too, that we still remember, the debates of, do you like garbage collected languages or not? And should you do manual? And today, no one really talks about that anymore. Maybe some people do, but today it's pretty obvious to most people that, at least most web developers, and, web programming now is obviously all JavaScript, and it's pretty high level. I don't think anyone is really yearning for those days where you had to go manually manage memory, allocate it, deallocate it, et cetera. It just doesn't happen anymore, right? And so I think what's happening is, and it will continue to happen for what it's worth, is that we are continuously moving higher and higher up the stack. And every time you move higher up in the stack, there are more people capable now of programming,
mm,
which is even before AI. If you look at the web developers of, let's say, 2020, for example, what percent of those people would have been developers had the only language they could write been assembly? I don't think 100%. I think maybe 20%, let's say, because assembly is a harder language to write than, for example, JavaScript. And so there are probably less people interested in it. It's probably more frustrating. So people select it less, etc. Right. So
yeah.
every time programming moves higher level, more people can do it. And so I actually don't view the two personas, let's say the power Excel user who's good at writing formulas and can reason through things and can
Mm,
pick up a bit of SQL, honestly, as that different as yesterday's developers who are now moving higher level.
mm,
Many people at Retool today, many engineers at Retool today use Cloud Code extensively.
yeah.
And the way they're coding with Cloud Code, you do have to read the code, obviously. You're not just fully vibing, obviously. But it's definitely moving higher up in the stack. And that's actually why we target semi-technical people. We don't target totally non-technical people, is that for now, I think for the next few years, I would say it is actually very important that you are able to read some code. And the reason for that is LLMs just very easily make mistakes. And I don't know if you've tried vibe coding in, for example, Lovable, Replit, Bolt, these kinds of applications, but those things are so inaccurate right now. It's funny. I was talking to a customer the other day, and they were trying to build some dashboards with Replit, actually. And they built, actually, three people in the company built the same dashboard. They all independently had the same idea. So they built the same dashboard. They were all being used extensively in the company. And all three dashboards did the same thing, but showed different numbers. And that gives you a sense, like, well, what, I mean, like, those three people probably were not technical. They probably didn't check the SQL. And they're like, okay, like, it kind of looks about right. And so I'm going to ship it. And that's, I think, we're going to see a lot of that, I think, over the next few years. And I think, if we can't get rid of hallucinations in LLMs, which I don't think we can, technology wise, at least in the next 12, 18 months without a totally new architecture, you will see problems like that. And that, I think, is pretty scary, honestly. And I think as software engineers, it's going to be, it's really frightening to get pulled in to be like, okay, well, we've got three dashboards that have different numbers. What do we do? And we're like, okay, we got to stare at the code. It's like a lot more people create software, but also creates a lot more problems. So anyways, I think there's something interesting there. Maybe to talk about it all, but to go back to your original question, I think that the needs of the pro Excel user are actually not that different from the developer, because the developer has moved higher level, but that has also enabled the Excel user to start programming. But the developer actually does not want to be writing Redux code. They don't want to be writing assembly anyways, actually. And so, yeah, that's how I would view sort of these two personas almost merging over time.
How are you, maybe this is kind of a similar question or something you alluded to earlier, but like, how do you actually call out, like, how do you speak to that broader group that's like developers plus people that are like vibe coding or like just dabbling and starting to like occasionally look at code, but for the most part, not?
Yeah, so what's really interesting is actually, if you look at the stats internally for who is actually building in Retool, it turns out that 4 years ago, the percent of developers building a Retool was like 90, 95%. Like pretty much everyone was a professional software developer, like yourself. You were building a Retool. But if you actually look at where it's gone to in the last few years, and this was happening even before LLMs, actually. So it's an LLM, it's independent of LLMs, although LLMs have actually, in fact, accelerated the trend. I think 2 years ago, the percentage of non-developers building a Retool is maybe 30%. So 30% of people building a Retool are actually non-developers. Today, it's around 50, 60%, actually. And so that gives you a sense, like, this is a trend that will continue regardless, honestly. Whether Retool exists or not, it doesn't matter. This trend will continue. Non-developers will go build software. More people will go build software because software is becoming higher level, easier to build. And so I think that, to be honest, there's a lot of latent demand for software. Almost no company has, this sounds kind of weird, but almost no company has satiated their demand for software. They're always thirsty for more software. And so I think there's a lot of people that want to go build things. And if you can provide a application layer or infrastructure to help them go build in a safe, secure, accurate way, which I think we're the only company that helps you do that, I think that's very, very powerful. And I think it's going to be an enormously large market.
So do you think that you would say, like, just this is something that my boss actually was talking about, and like some other people, of like, what is, like, would you say that you guys are still a developer tool?
I would say so. But what I would argue is that the definition of a developer is changing. Uh, just like, for example, if let's say you move from assembly to C. C I think came in 1976 when it was first written. And you can imagine that some people that were writing assembly before would look at the people writing C and they would scorn them. They would say, "Oh, that's not a developer. You're not hardcore enough. You're not doing everything at such a low level anymore. You're so high level." Just like how possibly C developers look at today JavaScript developers, and we're like, "Oh, these aren't developers. Just slinging code around and writing some JavaScript, and they're not. They don't know what writing real code is like." But to be honest, I mean, I would call people writing JavaScript, I call them developers. I pretty well accepted today. And so I think at every stage there is this, as the definition of a developer broadens and more people come into the tent and more people go build software, there is a bit of uncertainty and a bit of, are they really developers? But I would define developer as someone who's able to build, iterate, maybe debug software is what I would say. And so I think maybe that's where, you get into the non-technical people, and I would not call them developers, which is, if they, let's say, vibe code something and they have no idea, and if let's say that number is wrong, they're building a dashboard, the number is wrong, and they're like, I don't know what to do. I give up. That I would probably not consider a developer. That's yeah, I don't know what I would call that. That's vibe coding. That's the downside of vibe coding. Uh, but people who are able to iterate and maybe inspect and understand, oh, okay, this is the issue. Let me go fix that issue. I would call that a developer. And so I think we are a developer tool, but the definition of a developer is certainly, again, with or without, is broad enough.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like that actually. So it's people that are actually gonna iterate and debug, and yeah, if they do that, however they do it, even if it's just with the prompt, then it's still developing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah. And it is it's finally time for JavaScript developers to look down upon a new breed of. The time has come.
Yeah, it's funny because some people, back in the day would say, oh, all you do is you write front-end code, all you do is you write CSS. That's not real development. And obviously it is, right? I mean, you're writing software. It just turns out that it's on the front end. And CSS is a more declarative, if you will, programming language. And so maybe it's easier or harder in certain ways, but it's still programming. It's still getting a computer to do your bidding. Maybe that's another way of putting, which is if a computer can do what you want, you're a developer. And if it doesn't do what you want, and you don't know how to get it to do what you want, you're not a developer. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's amazing. David, I wanted to ask about like the origins of Retool, and kind of the early days, because I think it's very interesting, especially like the fact that you started out like bootstrapped. Yeah, I always find that extremely interesting.
Yeah. So we started a Retool in around 2017, I believe, and at that point in time, we started it honestly just because we were developers who were had built so many internal tools. We thought there had got to be a better way. And it's funny because, like I mentioned, I come from a Rails background, and so when you use Rails, actually building a admin interface, I think there's active admin was what I used back in the day. It's super easy. You can just generate it because Rails has all the models, right? And so uh, you could just generate views very quickly on top of that, and it's all plugged in, and authentication is handled for you, etc. It's super simple. And I believe what ended up happening was actually my co-founder and we built an application not in Rails, and we were like, okay, crap, now we got to go build an app interface for this thing, and we're like, what do we do? And there was surprisingly nothing available. There is something, if you use Django, there's Django admin. If you use Rails, it's active admin. But if I think we might have built it in Node, or we might have built it in Clojure script. I don't remember. I think of it was maybe actually Clojure script, actually. I remember Clojure. And there is no admin framework. And so we were like, wow, so you truly just have to write all of this from scratch? And that was the state of internal tool development in 2017 when we first started, was you would have to do that from scratch. If you didn't use a framework, and even at that point, even if you had used Node, I don't think there was because as you may know, like Node is less batteries included than something like Rails is. Node doesn't tell you, oh, you have to use this, you have to use active record, for example. So it's not sort of all, cohesive, if you will. And so you kind of have to roll your own in a lot of things. You're putting, pieces together, if you will. So that's where Retool came from, is we thought I can't believe that every time we add a new model, every time we add a new table or a database, we can't generate the UI. We actually have to go in and manually work on the UI. And so we thought about, if we work on code generation, is that a good idea? We ended up deciding that it's actually better to go build a framework like Retool that instead of doing code gen, because code gen is a little bit more brittle. You have to regenerate code sometimes when you add another table, etc. You have a new relationship between tables. It gets more complicated. So we thought, let's go build something like Retool. And so that's where the idea for Retool first came from. And we built it entirely because we wanted a better way of building internal tools. And so it ties back to, honestly, if we were not the ICP, I don't think we would have been able to get Retool off the ground, because it is so hard to sell to people. It's so hard to find users. It's so hard to know what feature to build, etc., without being the ICP yourself.
How long did it take you to build the first version?
To be honest, the first version was very, very bare bones. It's funny because the despite all internal tools doing so many different things, every internal tool kind of looks the same. And so the very first version we built of Retool, I think had 3 or 4 components. And that was it. It was a text input, a table, and a button. And you're like, oh, 3 components doesn't sound that impressive. But actually, most internal tools are combinations of those components put together. Later on, we added charts, for example. I think we added some maps later. We added a microphone component. Someone who was interviewing for us built that microphone component actually, so you could go record sound. But it's pretty simple. And so we built that first version, I think, over the course of a few weeks. And then we started asking people, would you use it? And that's how Retool first started.
Wow. And who did you ask if you would use it? Like,
Let's see. So we started with friends first, but it turned out that most people in the world are not building internal tools at the exact moment you reached out to them. And so they were, it's kind of cool, but I don't know if I have a need for it right now. I've already built internal tools, and so I don't need it right now. So that wasn't super successful. And actually, we ended up trying another strategy, which also failed, which I'll talk about quickly, but it's kind of interesting.
yeah.
Was We had a hypothesis, which is, so what is Retool most like? Is it are there any products that may be similar to Retool? Was kind of one of our first ideas, and the idea of building user interfaces without having to write a lot of code is not, actually new. It's not totally revolutionary. There's actually a bunch of other products that have done that, including one called FileMaker. And so FileMaker was a pretty early, almost like a HyperCard kind of application where you could piece together UIs without writing much code. You could build simple forms, stuff like that.
Mm.
And so I actually ended up joining a LinkedIn group for FileMaker developers, and I infiltrated, if you will, the group, pretending to be a FileMaker developer. And they started messaging these people, asking them, hey, I know you're a big FileMaker fan. I am too, and I've actually built a new product called Retool. It's kind of like FileMaker, but it's in the cloud, actually. And so would you use this product? And I think we reached out to maybe 100 or 200 people, and out of 200 people, I think we got like 4 replies. And I think 3 of them were no's. I'm not interested in meeting you. And one reply was, let's hop on a call. And on this call, I'll tell you how bad this idea is. And so it's pretty funny. It was not an easy thing to get started, if you will. And so it was pretty uphill. In the end, we ended up going through Y Combinator, and I think we ended up talking to a bunch of other companies during YC. And out of the maybe 100 or 20 companies in that batch, I think we found one that became a real customer. Maybe 2, actually. 2 became customers of ours. And those were our first 2 customers. And they were building admin panels, and they just didn't know how to spend so much time doing it. So those were our first 2 customers. That's how Retool first started.
That's really cool. And then were you like, how did you then go, and were you then just going out to like find other people building? I guess because it's hard if you're looking for people that you have to catch them at the right time, then it's like when you're starting out and you're trying to validate, like,
Yes, so we got pretty good at getting specific at what were the qualities that would make you like Retool. And for example, one quality was, if you're more of a pragmatic engineer, you will like Retool more. If you care more about the business and achieving business outcomes, you're a better fit for Retool. If you're a very dogmatic person, maybe you are, I don't know, a functional programming advocate, which actually I am one, and you only write Clojure, for example. We're like, maybe that person is not quite the right fit for Retool because they're not going to be very receptive to it. So that was maybe more on the developer side. But a company quality we looked at was how fast did the company itself scale up? Because the faster the company is scaling, the more software it needs, probably. But also, we filter down to specific kinds of companies. So if you're a SaaS company, for example, you actually don't build that many internal tools. You don't need that many tools. Whereas if you're an operationally heavy
yeah,
or operationally focused company, let's say like a DoorDash, a Retool customer, Airbnb, a Retool customer, Boeing, a Retool customer, Lockheed Martin, another Retool customer, these kinds of companies have a lot going on in their business, as you can imagine. And so they need more applications and therefore they need more retool. So that's kind of the what we focused on was we started with a few small customers in our YC batch, and then we expanded out into these kinds of companies.
Yeah, and because we're at this stage right now where we're like, you know, in that like search for product market fit, and so I have a lot of questions on this just because it's very, very top of mind. But were you kind of as you like started to like refine like who the target customer is in terms of company, were you like reaching out to them directly? Were you kind of like trying to like lay like marketing traps as to like where people that um were in that category would hang out, or like how were you kind of expanding that?
Yeah, let's see for a sec. I think it helped to be very specific about who our target was, but it was broad enough that it was more than one person. If that,
Mm.
so like I mentioned on the first version of Retool, we had three components, and uh, what we discovered was that that is versatile enough to go acquire a fair number of customers and to get them interested, and then we'd have to go build more components or, other things too in order to make them more satisfied. But I guess what I would say is, try to start with sort of the smallest kernel of an idea that does have product market fit, but is still specific enough that you can go find people who want exactly that. And I
Yeah.
think you're going to try a few hypotheses, just like we tried, like I
Mm.
mentioned. You would think the FileMaker developers, someone who cares about building UIs in a faster way, you would think that they would care about Retool, but they didn't at all, actually. And so I think we tried a few tactics like that. And I actually don't know what number operationally heavy company was, a pragmatic engineers was, but it was probably, I don't know, like idea number four. It wasn't the first idea, if you will. And then you intersect all that. You're like, okay, so we want to find pragmatic engineers at uh, operational companies that are scaling very fast. Well, you can find that. You can go on LinkedIn, you can see, companies are growing quickly. You can filter those down by who's operationally heavy, and then to find the pragmatic engineers of them, we actually typically targeted the CTO or the co-founder and the engineering co-founder of the organization, because those are generally the most pragmatic engineers. Because if you're starting a company, you probably care about the company doing well, you care about moving fast, you care about the business, but you're also technical, so technical co-founder, right? So that gives you some, so we formed hypotheses like that. We tested it, and oftentimes we were wrong. Like the FileMaker one, we were just dead wrong. Sometimes we're right, and if we're right, then we repeat it. And it turned out that operationally heavy companies that are growing fast with technical co-founders was there's enough of them out there that we could get enough revenue to hire some people, get to the next stage, if you will.
Mm. Yeah, that's really cool. It's really cool. I was trying to think of like how I came across Retool, and I actually can't even can't even remember how I came across you guys. But I remember that when I heard I remember like the name resonated with me somehow,
Mm,
because it was like, oh, like yeah, building internal tools, and I just remember being very. I think the very first time I discovered it, I was working at a startup, and I'd just seen like engineers spend like weeks. Like we were a mobile app startup, and like I think there were three of us, and three developers, and one of the senior engineers spent like weeks, and then like some of the founders were like unhappy with how these
yeah.
internal tools looked, and they was like they were spending so much time on just how it looked, and I remember being like, "What?" And I was the most junior one at the time, but I was like, "What? Like, this doesn't matter, surely, like, this is just for us," like, but a lot of people can't look at a terribly formatted table, and I remember that there was, like, like, a lot of the like, Formico or something, and, like, there's all these,
Mhm.
like, JavaScript libraries for, like, forms. It's just like was quite complicated, and it's just like really easy to get it wrong. And then you want to put a filter, you want to put like sorting, and it's all this stuff that just like takes a long time, like pagination. It's just like ends up taking like weeks to just build like this little table that like, which sounds crazy now, I think, with the AI stuff, but like it was genuinely like, so I think when I heard about it, I was like, oh, and then I came to a landing page, it was like addressed every problem. So this is a long way to say, but how do you think people can kind of really tap into like, I feel like you tapped into like a pain very well.
Hmm. Well, to be honest, I don't have a great answer here besides the fact that it was our pain, and it turned out that more people besides us had that pain. My only advice here is, and we're thinking a lot about this now, as we think a lot about LLMs and how powerful they are and the agent stuff that I talked about earlier, because that's a new product. It's not a product that Retool, a lot of our customers, I think, want it. They told us they want it, but it's new, right? It's when we launched it last year, at least when we first launched this earlier, we had 0 customers when we first launched it, so we had to go discover and find product market fit, and now we have, which is great. But the advice there, I would say, is I think you, to some extent, have to live in the future. Uh, so you have to think about uh, in an ideal world, this problem that I have, how would it be solved a year from now, 5 years from now? And can I build that today? The technology exists to build that today. And for Retool, we certainly could. And for agents, you can today as well. Just to give you an example, like, I use Claude Code quite a bit myself, not just for coding, but also for automating other, running other things. I use the Chrome extension, for example. So Claude is a Chrome extension that allows Claude Code to actually control your web browser. And when you try it out, you could see the glimmer of something interesting there,
Incredible.
where, when you give it the tool of a web browser, it can do a lot. And yet it's so hamstrung, actually, where it's often have taking screenshots of web pages, and it's clicking, on particular, it can't really parse the DOM sometimes because the DOM consumes so many tokens. So it would rather take an image screenshot. And it's like, obviously, this is not the best way to create a calendar event. Is not, to go into calendar.google.com and then like try to drag this thing. And then like, if we hold the mouse button down or hold the mouse cursor down so the dragging doesn't work. And it's like, wow, like, it's, the element is so smart, it's so powerful. And yet, it's missing these things. And that's actually one of the core ideas behind our agents product is, what if instead of, giving an LLM such coarse tools, you give it very specific tools and connected to actual business data? If you can do that, then the LLM can do pretty gnarly, pretty crazy things in your business. And it's really pretty impactful if you do that. And so that's an example where I think, like, this is an example of a problem that I have, and, it results in the product. But I think you have to sort of have your own problems, if you will, and then think about, how would I solve this problem? Like, to me, the LLM interacting with the world via screenshots and it being very inaccurate, being very slow, cannot possibly be correct. It has to have more specific, sharper tools, if you will. And so that's where our agents product is going. And so that's maybe the only advice I would have is, I think, have your own problems and think about how to solve them in a future ideal state.
Yeah. Okay. I think this will potentially be the last one, depending. But one question I wanted to ask is like a lot of startup DevTools founders now that I speak to are having this kind of like existential kind of questions around like, if Claude Code can write, if we extrapolate and Claude Code can write code much better than we imagine now, and the product that you're selling is code, how do you think about like building kind of like business, something that's valuable in the long run when, maybe your customers can just say like, I want this, and there's something that I'm hearing these conversations, being part of these conversations a lot. How do you think about that?
It is honestly a little hard to say. I think the only answer I would have there, so actually I'm going to share an opinion first, is that I do think, and we see this in our customer base a lot today, people are buying less SaaS software, including dev tools, which is a subcategory
Mm.
of SaaS, because they are able to build their own thing themselves. Retool has had multiple customers who have churned away from Salesforce, churned away from Workday, churned away from their own ERP systems into Retool. Because now with AI, in Retool, you can actually go build these applications very rapidly,
Mm.
especially if it's connected to data, in Retool's case with security guardrails and everything. So to be honest, I see that happening. I would say that I think if I were a founder today in the dev tool space, I would really try to focus on a problem where it's possible to go build a moat, and the moat is strong enough that you people wouldn't rebuild you.
Mm.
And I'll give two examples. One not retool related and one retool related. So one not retool related is Tableau, which is today, theoretically, you could maybe get Claude Code to go build you a Tableau, maybe, but or even build it, a dashboard, if not the Tableau platform, a dashboard. But honestly, I think most people would probably still say, if you, especially if you have Tableau already purchased, but even if you don't have Tableau purchased, even today, I would probably still say I would rather just buy Tableau, pay them $25 per user per month, and have them handle everything. And we can go vibe code things, but let's go vibe code the SQL, because SQL is specific to us. We have to do it. I don't know if I would want to spend engineering resources building a query caching layer, building all those front end components, building all those charts. Like, it's just not worth it. I mean, I maybe could, but like, would I do it? I don't think so. Or would I direct my CTO or VP engineering to do it? I don't think so. And so the point I'm trying to make there is Tableau has built up a pretty strong moat where it doesn't really make sense for people to go do that. Maybe a similar one is, I mean, theoretically, you go build Cursor very easily. Like Cursor is, it's almost like a VS Code plugin. Like it's not. I don't think there's that substantial of a moat there. Yeah, Cursor is still a pretty big business, and yeah. So that's kind of maybe how I would view it. Is I think try to make as much of a moat as you can. I think user experience is more of a premium now because people will be willing to pay for that. Yeah, unfortunately, I think the cost of building yourself has gone down. And so a lot of people will buy less software, including developer tools, because they can build things themselves. And so I'm, on behalf of, maybe I apologize because a lot of people are putting those things in Retool. So sorry, but I do think it happens.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting time. It's fun. I don't know, but it is weird. Like the definitely feels like that equation. I saw this chart. This someone made this like graph that's like your PMF can kind of usually you would have to like it would kind of increase the bar would increase like linearly as to like what customers expect. And you have to keep up with that. But now sometimes like because of AI, it just goes up like and the whole path to like having PMF just falls out from below you because like the agents can do it. It's interesting. I don't know.
Yeah, it is interesting. Excited to see what happens the next few months, honestly, a few years.
Yeah. Okay. And then actually related, I do think like scaling DevTools, like is it going to be a thing in like 5 years where it's like people still
You're
talk about DevTools or if it's just like, you know, just tools. I don't know.
So yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe it will be more scaling tools, if you will, than necessarily developer tools. But I think it remains to be seen whether everyone wants to be a developer. I don't. I'm not confident in that.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like even if we can all do math. We can all do addition, multiplication, etc. But not many of us are mathematicians, if you will.
Mm.
We all use math to some extent, but it's not. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true. David, where can people go to learn more about what you're working on over at Retool?
Yeah. So Retool, our website is just retool.com. So come find us there.
And have you got any shout outs you want to make? Any plugs?
No, I think we have an incredible team executing on our strategy of winning enterprise application generation. So pretty excited for our whole team. But there's a lot to go and do this year. So thanks for having me on the show. So shout out to you, I suppose.
Thanks. Amazing. Well, thank you very much, David. Thanks for listening. Thanks for Creighton for making it happen. And yeah. Thanks for
Yeah.
everyone.
Thanks, Jack. It was really great to meet you. So
Great to meet you.
awesome.